right, can we settle? Thank you. Kevin, are we ready? We good to go? Excellent. Can we have our journalists a bit closer so that... Yes. Kevin, please have a seat. Ohone, good morning. All right. Thank you so much. Mr. Johannes Kavahap, Governor of the Bank of Namibia. Mr. Epson Wanguta, Deputy Governor of the Bank. Mr. Penda Ithindi, the Advisor to the Minister of Finance, Management of the Bank of Namibia. Colleagues from the media fraternity, our esteemed viewers engaging with this content on our social media platforms, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and a hearty warm welcome to the Bank of Namibia for our annual report 2020 launch. As is customary and something that is worth celebrating in relation to inculcating a culture of effective governance in the country, the bank is hereby launching its annual report to comply to Section 67(1) of the Bank of Namibia Act 2020, Act number 1 of 2020. That section reads, the Bank of Namibia must, within 3 months after the end of the financial year, A, submit to the Minister a copy of its annual report, including a copy of the annual accounts to the bank, certified by the accountants and auditors. B, a report on the operations of the bank during that financial year. C, a report on the state of the economy and the conduct of monetary policy. And publish its annual report in both print and electronic formats. The bank has complied to this obligation as set out in the law for the better part of its 31 years of existence, and today is no exception. We do so at a time when the country is weathering the biggest storm since our country's hard-won independence 31 years ago. We do so when the central bank is called upon to marshal its resources, human and otherwise, to assist the country to recover. We do so with the Governor, Johannes Kavahap, at the helm since July of last year. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our annual report launch. Our program is brief. First things first, the Governor shall present a highlight of the report, which outlines the governance of the bank, key achievements of the bank in 2020, global and domestic economic and financial developments, the audited annual financial statements, and the bank supervision report. This will be followed by remarks from the Honourable Minister's representative, Mr. Ithindi. Our program will conclude with a handover of the dividend to government. With that, permit me to invite the Governor of the Bank of Namibia to present and officially launch the annual report. The Governor, sir, the floor is yours. Please help me to welcome him to the podium.
Deputy Governor Epson Wanguta, Mr. Penda Ithindi, the Advisor to the Minister of Finance, colleagues, members of the media, those who are in the room and those who are following us, welcome to this auspicious event. It's a very special event for us. Our financial year ended December 31st, 2020, and 3 months after that, to launch our annual report. For anyone involved in that exercise, you know it's a major achievement. I can only commend the colleagues at the bank, the Deputy Governor who was the chair of the editorial committee, our research department, and all the colleagues who assisted in delivering this annual report. Thank you for a piece of work that you have done. It's well done. So I want to basically focus on 4 things. The operations of the bank in the year 2020, developments in the global and the local economy, and clearly my outline is not something that I needed. Right. So this annual report covers the period 1st of January 2020 till the 31st of December 2020. The report communicates the bank's operations and activities to all its stakeholders. The aim is to enhance understanding on the role and the responsibilities of the Bank of Namibia, and also to comply with statutory requirements as alluded to earlier by the Director of Ceremonies. Additionally, what we're going to try and do with this report is to give you insight in the governance and stakeholder highlights for the year, an overview of the financials of the Bank of Namibia for the year 2020. We're going to give you a very high-level snapshot of what happened in the domestic and the global economy and banking supervision during the year that was, that's the year 2020. And we'd like to believe that clear and transparent communication with all our stakeholders is vital to building sustainable long-term relationships and understanding on the role, responsibilities, and the mandate of the Bank of Namibia. If you look at the highlights for the year 2020, I think we all will agree that the year 2020 was exceptionally challenging due to COVID-19, and it has severe and devastating impact. If you look at the global economy, it's contracted, the domestic economy is contracted, and I'll give you some figures now. You know, we have been doing as a nation quite well in terms of managing our debt. You know, the fiscal consolidation efforts were disrupted during 2020 because we needed to go and find extra 8 billion Namibian dollars to contain the spread of this pandemic. That has led to our debt to GDP ratio to out of line for what we have targeted and what we have set ourselves. So the work that we have been doing to manage our public debt has been disrupted last year by COVID. But what we did as a Bank of Namibia would like to believe that we've really assisted the local economy with swift and timely monetary stimulus to assist individuals, to assist households and our businesses. You know, last year for the first time, because we have got very little imports, we had our current account in surplus for the first time in a very long time. The bank also made great progress on its strategic objectives. We've got 8 objectives in terms of the mandate of the bank, and I'm pleased to inform you that we have done very well on the objectives in terms of the management of the bank. Some highlight also during 2020 was that we have celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Bank of Namibia. Another highlight worth mentioning is that for the last year, we have changed the Act enabling legislation for the Bank of Namibia. So the Bank of Namibia Act 2020 that came into being last year, and it also came with an expanded mandate for the Bank of Namibia. An expanded mandate in terms of the macro-prudential oversight coordination role of the bank has been clarified and has been explained in the new legislation that we have got. Our banking sector remained profitable, they remained liquid, and they remained well capitalized during the year 2020, despite some deterioration in asset quality. Our national payment system remained effective and efficient. We had no disruption in the flow of credit. We had no disruption in payments and settlements, so it's working for the economy. We also started a deposit guarantee scheme, and we have implemented that last year. That is a scheme where the banks are providing some premiums or some insurance in case something goes wrong with the commercial banks that we have got in the country. For the first time, we started getting that insurance. The banks contributed. This year in April, it's going to be the second year. What's going to happen is the deposit guarantee scheme has got its own board, and we hope that the board will issue an annual report and a statement about what happened for the year 2020. That will happen very soon. Right, what happened in terms of maintaining the operations of the bank? Let's look at the financials of the bank. You'll probably see the financials signed off by external auditors in the statement when you have got the annual report itself. But to explain at the very high level, the financials, the income of the bank is fundamentally linked to the foreign reserves that we are managing on behalf of the government. So the stock of international reserves increased in the year 2020 by about 9.7% to 31.8 billion. And that increase is basically because of two reasons. That's good SACU revenues that we have received in the year 2020, and also because of the depreciation in our currency. The revenue, that's the net interest income for 2020 was 533.7 million Namibian dollars versus 642 million in the year 2019. So the difference that you see in 2019 and 2020, in 2019 that number was about 642 million, and the year 2020 it was down to 533 million. The simple reason is because we are living in a low interest rate environment. All our foreign assets are basically invested in interest-bearing instruments. So the underlying assets had low interest that they earned, and because of that, you see the reduction of the net interest income from 642 million to about 533 million. If you look at our expenditure, that increased to about 514 million versus 359 million in 2019. And if you look at that number, you know, for the uninformed eye, it will look, it's a big increase in expenditure from 359 million to 514 million. So let me try and give you the two key reasons why that number increased significantly. The first one is we provided about 52 million to the credit guarantee scheme. The bank physically provided 52 million to that, and we also have got some IT project within the bank of about 59 million. So those are the two big buckets. And then we also paid about 9 million for this Harvard program that we are having. So those are the three big things that resulted into an increase from 359 million to 549 million. If you really compare like for like, our expenditure increased by about 5% from the year 2019 to year 2020. That's if you normalize it for these once-off items that I've explained. And those three were the big IT project of close to 60 million, the 52 million we gave for the credit guarantee scheme, and about 9 million we paid for the Harvard project. So the outturn, if you look at the difference between our income and our expenses, that gave us a number that we called a surplus or a loss. That was about 532 million for the year 2020. We only budgeted 236 million because of the low interest rate environment, but we have done much better than we have planned. So if you planned about 236 million and you came out of 532 million in the year of COVID, in terms of our operating surplus, that is a very, very good achievement. So I'd like to commend the management, the directors in the Bank of Namibia for the splendid results they have delivered. Yes, it is lower than the 849 million in 2019, but you know, 2020 we had the full-blown COVID-19. And we could see the impact of the low interest rate environment in the numbers. Despite the low interest rate environment, the Bank of Namibia declared a dividend of 278 million to the shareholder. So we'll hand that over later, as you've heard from the Director of Ceremonies. If any entity at this point in time is declaring dividends to that magnitude, it shows it is a well-run institution, it's a well-disciplined place, it's having governance is what it should be in any institution that you have got in the country. Right, if you look at the governance at a very high level, we have got a very rigorous corporate governance framework that's led by a board, and that board is supported by a number of board committees. And we also have got independent assurance providers that helps that we make sure that the governance is as rigorous as you can get. Risk management follows an integrated approach. It is well entrenched in all the operations and departments and operations of the bank. There is a very clear segregation of duties regarding the role of the board and the functioning of the Monetary Policy Committee. You know, many people don't know, they think our board has got involvement in the running of monetary policy decisions. When we decide on interest rates, that is an independent committee in the bank called the Monetary Policy Committee, and they really run the monetary policy of the bank. Now with the expanded responsibility, we've also started a new committee called the Macro-Prudential Oversight Committee, the MOC. So that is also going to be an independent entity. The board delegated that responsibility to the committees. So we've got two committees, one looking after monetary stability and the other one looking after financial stability. So those are well entrenched. It's got clear terms of references, and the way it works is something we can be proud of in our country. The independence of the Bank of Namibia is also maintained in terms of the Bank of Namibia Act, and the new act is clear about the independence of the bank. No one can unduly or improperly influence the Bank of Namibia in terms of its conduct of its activities. Right, let's give you a high-level view about what's happening in the global economy and the local economy. Global economic growth contracted in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but it is projected to improve in 2021. You know, what's quite interesting is that the global economy is going to improve much better and quickly than the Namibian economy. But that's the numbers in terms of what we have seen from the IMF. If you look at the global monetary policy stances and inflation during 2020, it was very much expansionary, it was very much supportive, it was very much accommodative for most of the central banks that we have seen. Some central banks also adopted supplementary non-conventional measures to help contain the spread of the pandemic and also to help with the recovery of the economies that they have got. Inflation was generally subdued in both advanced economies and emerging markets and developing economies on the back of lower food and energy prices and weak global economic activity. I'm really giving you a very high-level view. I'm pretty sure you all will take the annual report after this, and you're going to read through all the detail is contained in the annual report that we're going to circulate after this. If you look at the Namibian economy, we got numbers out. Now, the latest numbers about what happened to our economy in 2020. We have been forecasting numbers of 7.8%, 7.9%. The economy actually contracted by about 8% in 2020. The numbers for 2019 were also recasted. You'll see that contraction in 2019 was 0.6%, and in 2020 it's 8%. 8% we know is largely because of COVID, because of the drought that we had, and commodity prices. The contraction in the economy was broad-based, with the sharpest declines in the tourism sector, that's hotels, lodges, restaurants, and transport sectors, because we had restrictions on transport, we had restrictions on travel and tourism, and that's why you have seen that that sector was hardest hit because of COVID. If you look at the outlook and the key risks that we are facing, I think the downside risk are uncertainty around the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. You know, the risk that we have got is also successes of vaccinations in Namibia and around the globe. You have got downside risk in terms of travel restrictions that are still in place for many countries, and you have got persistently low international prices for some of Namibia's export commodities. We also have got some climatic swings with the possibility of both floods and droughts in various parts of the country. Those are mostly the downside risks that we have got in 2021. But what we are projecting is that our economy will grow by about 2.7% in 2021. I think many people are probably projecting and wanted to know what's happening with inflation. I think Namibia's inflation rate climbed to about 2.2% in 2020 on the account of lower inflation for housing and transport, but slightly picked up in January and February 2021. I think once the economy recovers, you expect inflation to pick up. And when the inflation picks up, monetary authorities will probably do something. I'm pretty sure when the bank starts responding to inflation that's picking up and inflation outlook that's probably warranting that we need to look at interest rates, the focus will be big on the Bank of Namibia. So far, when we reduced the rate, it was relatively quiet. Everybody seemed to be happy. But when we respond to what's going to happen when the economy recovers, there's going to be a big focus on what's happening in the country. So inflation for Namibia averaged about 2.2% during 2020 compared to 3.7% that was registered during the previous year. The decline was reflected in housing and transport categories, which registered average inflation rates of -1% and 0.8% during the period under review. During the first 2 months of 2021, overall inflation rose slightly to about 2.7% compared to 2.3% during the corresponding period of 2020. This was mainly on account of an increase in the inflation for food and non-alcoholic beverages and housing. That's for the first 2 months of this year. If you look at growth in private credit extension, that is slowed to about 3.5% during 2020 compared to 6.8% in 2019. Don't know why is it 2018 there. The slower growth in credit extension, that was mainly from business, because the demand for credit from businesses was purely because of COVID. You know what COVID did was COVID shocked both the demand side and the supply side of the economy. So most businesses were probably sitting on inventory and stock. Because the demand was so low, they didn't want to go out to get more credit because they were sitting on inventory. Inventory and stock was not moving because of the depressed demand. Budget deficit, I'm pretty sure the Minister of Finance budget has provided that. It has widened last year to about 9.5%. And that was largely to contain the extra expenditure that we need to incur as a country to contain the spread of the pandemic. That's why you have seen the deficit to about 9.5% during the 2020-21 financial year. So our public debt also rose to about 60% over the year to the end of December 2020. If you look at what's happening with the balance of payments, that's what's happening with the statement that basically tells us our transactions with the rest of the world. If you could see that for the first time in 2020, because we did not import as we used in the past, we saw that we had the current account in positive territory. Once that normalizes, you'll probably see that the current account will come back in the usual territory where it used to be from 2016 to 2020. What that graph is also telling you is that as a nation, we are importing more than we are exporting, as you could see from that dotted line. So the stock of international reserves rose to about 31.8 billion due to good inflows from SACU, depreciation of the Namibian dollar against major currency, and a lower import bill. So we don't import. We didn't import in 2020 as we used to in the past. And combination of those three things actually resulted in our foreign international reserves at 31.8 billion versus 28.9 billion in 2019. We expect, however, that number is going to decline in 2021 because we expect SACU revenues to be depressed in the new financial year. What happened to our currency? The Namibia dollar depreciated against all major currencies during 2020, particularly in the first 4 months, with partial recovery thereafter. So let's look at what's happening with our banking sector, because we are the regulator and we supervise our commercial banks. So many people are asking what's happening with the banking sector. And in 2020, the banking sector remained profitable, remained liquid, and it remained well capitalized in 2020. What happened is that we could see some of the assets quality that had deteriorated, but we also could see the loans, particularly on credit from businesses, were actually that contracted in 2020. But overall, apart from non-performing loans, because of COVID, because many people lost their jobs, we could see that NPLs were going in the wrong directions. We hope to see what happened in the first 3 months of this year. But generally, our banking system is stable, it's sound, it remains profitable. It remained adequately capitalized. All capital ratios stood above the statutory requirements. The Common Equity Tier 1 and total eligible capital ratios stood well above the minimum regulatory requirements of 6%, 9%, and 11.5% respectively. So if you look at key indicators, the banks are really in a stable and sound financial position. I've alluded to the fact that asset quality is deteriorated and NPLs rose above the new trigger ratio of 6%. You know, if you have got crises and events, you know, I don't know how many people know that, you know, with COVID, it's once in a 100-year event that you are dealing with. So what you are seeing currently, it's totally unusual. It's abnormal. It's not something that you could say this is normal and compare 2019 or 2020. This has not happened in 100 years. Right, let me try and conclude then at a very high level. If you need any detail, you can ask questions after our presentations, or you can take the annual report and read. In summary, I think COVID-19 pandemic had severe impacts. The global economy contracted in 2020 compared to a positive growth in 2019. Our economy registered a deep contraction of about 8%, following a milder contraction the previous year. Fiscal consolidation was disrupted as we needed extra expenditure to contain the pandemic. The current account recorded a surplus from a deficit in the previous year, and the stock of international reserves increased. The Bank of Namibia provided swift and timely monetary policy stimulus to assist individuals, to assist households, and to assist businesses. Inflation in Namibia is the lowest since independence. Our banking sector remained profitable, resilient, and well capitalized despite deterioration in asset quality. The Bank of Namibia itself made great strides on its strategic objectives. We have reorganized our operations in the face of COVID-19 to continue delivering the services that we are supposed to render to the nation. We have also celebrated our 30th anniversary last year. We have seen the new Bank of Namibia Act, which expanded our mandate, and that was implemented in 2020. We have got a very effective and efficient national payment system, and we have maintained that. There was no major disruption in credit flows. The Stability Enhancing Deposit Guarantee Scheme has been operationalized during 2020. The bank recorded surplus income and thus declared a dividend of 278 million to the shareholder. And we are guided by a very strong, rigorous corporate governance framework that's in place. Thank you very much for listening to me. I thank you.
Another round of applause to the Governor. The main takeaway is that the bank continued to excel in the execution of its mandate during 2020. Now, next on our program is the advisor to the Minister of Finance. As you are well aware, both entities are responsible for fiscal and monetary policy in the country, and they ensure sound macroeconomic stability. The bank is also under obligation to hand over copies of the annual report to the Minister for further tabling in the National Assembly, which it performed with distinction earlier today. So another round of applause to the team for complying with that obligation. Mr. Ithindi, the floor is yours.
Director of Proceedings, Mr. Kadembire Lemburuka, Governor Gavahab, Deputy Governor Epson Wanguta, management of the bank, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, very good morning from me. I bring to you warm regards from Honorable Ipombo Shimi, Minister of Finance, former Governor of the bank. It is so true that Minister Ipombo would have liked to be here this morning. Because of equally coinciding events, he couldn't. He would definitely have liked to come to the second home, to the place that he knows better, even the corners in this beautiful auditorium that he knows better. I deliver his warm regards and indeed deliver to you his message on this important occasion. For me, indeed, I am also pleased and privileged to join you at this occasion because despite all the overall negative news that we get because of the heat from COVID-19, we see light at the end of the tunnel, and we are indeed delighted by the performance of the bank because the bottom line matters in finance. And I will not walk out of this hall empty-handed, I am assured. So that is pretty much pleasing. The Bank of Namibia annual report that is being launched here is of great utility. The rich data and information obtaining from the report find wide application in policy formulation, in policy review, in policy monitoring, in regulatory oversight, and in research. As a whole, the report serves as a lens through which a concrete view on the state of the economy, on the state of the financial system stability, monetary and financial sector developments are reflected. In that sense, the report is one of, if not the most single reference document and highly subscribed in terms of readership, as it provides an integrated account of the state of the economy and the financial affairs of the country at any point in time. It is a timely publication, and this timeliness of publication is not only compliance in law, but as once information actually is made available on a timely basis, that does enhance the utility of such information and therefore the value of the information. Let me therefore take this opportunity to congratulate the board of the bank, the management, and the staff for the usual timely publication of the report, this being an impeccable record which the bank has set for itself and for the diverse stakeholder community. Providing timely annual financial statements, as we know, is a difficult proposition for a number of institutions, and we know some examples which I cannot go into. I'm pleased to note that the bank, as the macroprudential regulator for the financial system and the monetary authority for the country, sets a good precedence in this regard. In fact, due to the stature of the institution and due to the macro criticality of an institution such as Bank of Namibia, the bank cannot afford, of course, to falter on this score. This standard of good governance, Governor, this standard of service excellence must be maintained well in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the synopsis which Tate Gavahab has provided as regards the economic developments, as regards the monetary and financial sector developments over the past year, and the bank's financial performance under a very difficult environment, is one that we are all familiar with and cannot be overemphasized. We have realized and we know too well that we live in uncertain times due to the coronavirus pandemic. The hit on the economy, as we have heard, has affected all sectors of the economy, although to a varying degree, but each and every sector has felt the negative impact of the pandemic and continue to do so. Its effect on profitability in the domestic financial sector is unprecedented in recent times, putting pressure on business performance and on lines of credit facilities that are provided by the banking sector, for instance. This raises the need to maintain visible supervision over the sector and in the financial system in general, given the elevated risks. Nonetheless, we learned some lessons as well, and we have adapted to the challenges posed by the pandemic. One of the key lessons is the increasing need for coordination, for policy coordination, and for coordination of strategy execution. So monetary and fiscal policy coordination is our common commitment, which we should continue to adhere to and execute well in the future. The fiscal and the monetary policy and the regulatory relief provided since the onset of the pandemic last year have indeed helped to prevent the worst outcomes. The projected economic recovery this year, we know well, is weak. It is underpinned by significant downside risks, which the governor has enumerated. The situation remains fluid because of the nature the pandemic is evolving and the duration with which we live with the pandemic. We should therefore guard against sudden withdrawal of policy support to the economy going forward. So over the medium to the long term, this coordination, this policy coordination, but also coordination of the strategic intervention actions is indispensable as we seek to stabilize the macroeconomic framework, as we seek to induce inclusive growth, as we seek to induce job creation in the economy. Another key lesson, ladies and gentlemen, that we have learned during these difficult times is the increasing need for partnerships, increasing need for integration. We can deliver better as a team. We can deliver better if we have a package of measures and a package of actions than silos or single policy instruments which do not really optimize synergy, which do not optimize impact. We thank the bank for partnership on various fronts, ranging from research products, from advisory services, and the day-to-day coordination of the policy matters. On the corporate social responsibility, the bank continues to make a difference. The bursary program contributes to talent development in the economy, contributes to skills formation in the economy. You have also responded, the bank has responded generously and on a targeted manner to the needs in the health sector through donations of PPEs. Going forward, ladies and gentlemen, important undertakings are on the horizon. For instance, His Excellency the President has launched the Harambee Prosperity Plan 2 with a focus on, among others, the economic recovery interventions under the economic advancement pillar. The 2021-2022 budget, which is now before Parliament, proposes specific reforms to induce growth, to induce a stabilization of macroeconomic framework, and to achieve socio-economic objectives. A week ago, the Director General of the National Planning Commission launched a development finance assessment report for Namibia, with a call for the country to design and implement an integrated national financing framework as a toolkit to mobilize resources, domestic or international, private or public, to finance national development priorities. And the INFF, the Integrated National Financing Framework, is indeed actually a mechanism which seeks to align planning to budgeting and financing, such that as we move in the environment of NDP 6, for instance, but also looking at our commitments and what we have domesticated in terms of the Agenda 2030, the global agenda, in terms of Agenda 2063, and our own national development plans, the Harambee Prosperity Plan, the NDPs, all this, if you cost them, you would realize that the quantum of resources that are needed to implement such plans is humongous. And therefore, coordination is needed to mobilize the necessary resources that could fund the highest priorities arising from these programs. The Ministry of Finance is in collaboration. The Ministry of Finance, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health and Social Services, is working with the Vaccine for Hope initiative, a collaborative initiative of the private sector, including all commercial banks, by the way, to mobilize private sector contribution to the acquisition and rollout of COVID-19 vaccine nationally. Together, we are seized with the analytical work for the formulation of the post-pandemic economic recovery and the growth plan. And we know we have on our desks, and we wish to ascertain that the legal drafting of the amendments to the Banking Institutions Act should now be finalized to enable the tabling of the bill in the next session of Parliament. So to make headway on all these matters, some of them being big-ticket items which are critical for us to make headway to overcome some of the challenges that we see, our continued collaboration on the implementation of these reforms and intervention measures is key. So to conclude, Director of Ceremonies, Governor, let me again reiterate our appreciation to you and to your team for the good work over the past year and now. We have no doubt that you will continue on that path. Notably, the financial results which you have presented and the surplus realized for the year under review, amounting to more than $500 million Namibia dollars during that difficult environment, is testimony to the prudent financial management of the bank, is testimony to the prudent management and the placement of investments under the bank. As such, the shareholder is today a recipient of a handsome dividend, and I can therefore not wait and cannot continue to talk orally any longer, but await to receive that handsome amount. Let the bank continue to be the center of excellence. I look forward to continued, the Minister says, to continued coordination and to a similar event next year. We do hope then that in the coming year, the dividend will not be lighter than this year and now. Thank you so much.
Well, Mr. Ithindi, you couldn't wait any longer, so let's get that aspect of the program underway. Let me invite you and the governor to join us on that platform right there, so that one, we hand over the dividend, and secondly, a presentation of the annual report, and then my friends from the media will be able to take some pictures of that historic event. Right there, please.
Did you want me only alone?
The first picture, we'll take just you and Tate Ithindi, and then we'll invite the Deputy Governor and the Executive Management team who are present. So first things first, the annual report, hand over, please. Go ahead.
It gives me great pleasure to present the annual report for the year that has ended December 2020 to the representative of the Ministry of Finance. This report provides an overview of the operations of the Bank of Namibia for 2020. It provides information on the governance framework of the bank. It provides an overview of the performance of the domestic and the global economy. And it also contains fully audited annual financial statements of the Bank of Namibia for the year 2020. You'll see in the report that despite COVID challenges that we have got, the bank delivered an operating surplus of 532 million Namibian dollars. That's more than $500 million Namibian dollars. And for that, we'll have to give something to our shareholders. So if you allow me, Mr. Ithindi, accept on behalf of the board of the Bank of Namibia the annual report in terms of the statutory requirements we have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Governor. Thank you so much to the team. I congratulate you and your team on behalf of the Minister. Truly speaking, it is an unmatched and it's a record, it's a standard that we wish to see. That the institutions, especially in the financial sector, that we are able, within a period of 3 months after the end of the financial year, that the financials of the institutions are published. That is the best standard that we get to. And as you are aware that in the current proposition of the NBIll, the Financial Institutions and Markets Bill, that is also the standard that is being advanced for the non-banking financial sector. Congratulations, Governor. Thank you so much.
So the Bank of Namibia is a well-run institution. It's a well-governed institution. You've seen we have delivered our annual report within the 3 months to the Ministry of Finance. And now it's my pleasure to hand over a dividend of 278.1 million Namibian dollars to the representative of the Minister of Finance. That is dividends for the year ended December 2020. Mr. Ithindi, accept on behalf of the board of the Bank of Namibia our dividend for the year 2020.
Thank you so much. I wish the governor would give me the whole credit card because he has actually wiped out checks, cleared out checks from the bank system. And I just needed the whole card. I'll manage it. I want to manage the public debt. I'll make sure that I remain within the right.
Thank you so much.
As we have said, this is what you have. When you have an institution that creates value instead of destroying or value destruction, when you have quality management institutions, you have value creation and you have returns on investment. And this is a sign of such quality, the outcome results of such governance and management standards. Thank you so much and well received.
Thank you. Round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Governor, Mr. Ithindi, if you could just come back, I'm sure my colleagues from the media may have some questions for at least the governor. I'm not so sure. Mr. Ithindi, you may actually decline if there are some hard-hitting questions your way. But yes, any questions from the media, please? We'll pass on the mic, and as usual, please state your name and the organization that you represent, and then ask the governor the questions. Kevin?
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Kevin. I work for Eagle FM, and thank you so much for inviting us at this very important event. I do have a few questions for you, Honorable Governor, in light of the presentation you made. In terms of our economic projection, and possibly if we are to focus on the economic burden that Namibia presents on the consumer. Yesterday, the bad news that we got from the Minister of Mines and Energy to say another spike in terms of fuel prices, diesel and petrol going up by 50 cents, that being on account of the rising prices in oil. Do you project a persistent pattern of fuel prices during the course of this year, looking at what's happening on the side of OPEC? And do you see that exerting pressure when it comes to our inflation? That's the first question. And the second question pertains to the African Development Bank loan that was extended to Namibia. The announcement having been made just a few days ago by the Finance Ministry. As the governor, I want to hear from you, where exactly should that money go? Because there's a concern that we might end up using that money for salaries and not really for the productive elements in our economy. And this one could be a speculative answer you can give us, but if you can just grant us that opportunity to hear from you in terms of the expectation now from the International Monetary Fund, where the IMF is set to make a decision today to see if this money can be extended to Namibia. Looking at the relationship that Namibia has with the IMF in terms of borrowings, we are not really in the red, we are actually in the green. What are the chances of us getting that money? And if we are to get this money, where exactly should it go? Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Any other question? We'll only take one round of questions. Is everybody happy? I don't see any hand. Sorry? Okay. Emil, you're good. Angie, you're good? Nice. My dear sister. All right. Governor, you say?
Right, I think it's quite easy. As far as the IMF loan is concerned, we are a monetary authority. You know, the IMF loan is the realm of the Ministry of Finance. So you're best placed to ask your questions to the Minister of Finance. What are the chances of getting that? Ask the question to the Minister of Finance or whoever, the representative Minister of Finance here. AFDB loan, where should it be spent to? That's probably also a question that you need to pose directly to the Minister of Finance or to his representative. In terms of fuel prices, I think the fuel prices are driven by two key things. One is the volatility in the price itself because of demand and supply fundamentals that you have got. And secondly, it's driven by what's happening in terms of the exchange rate environment. So you need to form a view on those two. And demand and supply is anything that can go from a shock in the supply of, you know, many people were saying some of the countries, because of what happened in the Suez Canal with that big vessel that got stuck in there, that had some impact on some supplies, and it increased the price of fuel in some jurisdictions. So we need to form a view around what's going to happen in terms of the price itself and what's going to happen with the exchange rate. So as far as the exchange rate is concerned, we have got a forecast and a projection for the full year, and you can have a look at that. Talk to Florette after this. Based on that, you know, we don't see something really bombing out or something out of the ordinary that we've seen. But the question that you have asked is, whenever you have got an increase in the fuel price, clearly it's going to put pressure on inflation. And if inflation is running, we have out of control, we've got tools to manage that. So I hope it provides answers to you. The other two are best placed to the minister's representative or to the minister directly.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the questions. And to respond with regard to the ADB financing and borrowing, I mean, we should have context within which the access or borrowing to either from ADB or from IMF is concerned. Context to that. We have, please notice that the application to borrow from ADB this time around and from IMF, these are done in the context of COVID-19. Not your traditional thing. We do have a program with the African Development Bank, but this time around, whether it's the application to ADB or to IMF, is in the context of COVID-19. Why? Because if you look at our income, and this is not only for Namibia, but for all the countries, including large, developed, advanced economies, revenue is hit. The public revenue has declined due to the impact of COVID-19. So when you look at our revenue expectations prior to the pandemic and in the presence of the pandemic, you notice that we have lost about 8 to 9 billion shaved off from the revenue expectations because of the impact on by the pandemic. Spending in the situation of that nature, when your income is reduced, ordinarily you have to realign your spending such that it does not aggravate the budget deficit and public debt. We have, and over the past year, you have noted that government has done its level best to reduce spending what it can, to the point that spending is cut to the bone, and we are able only to retain that spending that is necessary to provide for the basic goods and services. So the current borrowing requirements and the applications, therefore, to ADB or IMF is for the purpose of plugging the gap that occurred on revenue and therefore an increase on the budget deficit because of the shock on income. So where should that money go? It funds the budget deficit because the budget deficit is wider than initially planned. Ordinarily, you would want, when you borrow, that you fund capital budget. So when money is received, of course, it serves all purposes. It serves to fund the capital budget, which is 5 billion at the moment, because much of the capital budget is funded through borrowing, but it also helps to plug the budget deficit, which is wider as a result of COVID-19. So that is really the essence of the borrowing from these multilateral institutions. I cannot speculate on the decision of IMF as regards the loan application. So that is left to the board, but we do believe that we are a credible entity, country, a credible sovereign member of the fund. Notice that this facility, the rapid financing instrument of IMF, is specially designed to assist the membership to cope with the pandemic. And this application is against our shareholding in the fund. It is not against any other thing. It's premised on our shareholding in the fund. So we don't speculate the board decision, but we do believe that we have not sought that much funding from our own institution where we are shareholder, and we do think that our application will be seen from that light and credibly from that perspective. I hope I have answered and provided context in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Kevin, I'm sure you have some follow-ups, but because of time consideration, can you just follow those up with Tate Ithindi after the program? So as we conclude the program this afternoon, let me thank the governor, the deputy governor, the board, the staff of the bank for again delivering and executing the mandate of the bank without fail during 2020. A round of applause, please. To our valued stakeholder, the Ministry of Finance, represented this morning by Tate Ithindi, we extend a very hearty vote of thanks to you, sir, and the Honorable Minister of Finance for the support and your kind words and acknowledgement of what the bank does. A round of applause, please. Let me also express our gratitude to the Annual Report Editorial Committee, the coordinator of the annual report this year, Sarah Kashaka, Tate Erwin Namwaka, under the able leadership of the Director of Research and Financial Stability, Floret Nakusera. Again, you have demonstrated that no task is too challenging for you, for I know the energy, the reading, the editing, the sleepless nights that goes into the production of the annual report. A round of applause, please. To our most valuable guests of today, the members of the media, you are important to telling the Bank of Namibia's story. Do not stop. Do not relent. The public's trust in the bank is what it is because of you. As such, I cannot thank you all for your continuous support on that front. Lastly, let me thank the rest of us in this venue and on our social media platforms. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you so much, and goodbye. So we will now take a photo session. The members of the management team of the bank, the governor and the deputy governor, accompanied by Tate Ithindi, just right in the foyer. The rest of us, please, let's enjoy the refreshments that are in the foyer as well. Thank you so much.